hopefully those of you that are in the room, you can hear me and see the screen, the PowerPoint slide showing ISO 29001. Could someone in the room maybe just either under questions or the chat give me a quick okay or yes, I can see you, or something like that? See and hear me indeed. Hopefully that's the case. Just keeping an eye open here. Okay. Can see and hear you. Lovely. Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you very much. Okay, good. So hopefully that's the case for everyone that's in the virtual room. What we're going to be doing is just give it another minute or so, just for let people wander in as they come in from various places, and then we'll make a little start run through just about 29001. Okay. Just a quick question for everyone. Hopefully everyone can see see me, maybe just slightly smaller than real life, and also the main PowerPoint slide. Hopefully that's the case for everyone. Someone can just give me a quick thumbs up on that. That'd be great, or an okay or something like that. Okay. Hopefully that's the case. Someone give me an okay. There we are. Excellent. Thank you. Good stuff. Okay. Give it another 30 seconds or so, just to let the last few people wander in, because there's quite a few people who are expected to join us today, so we'll let them come in case they're stuck in traffic somewhere. Okay. Okay. Right, okay, so we're going to make a start just on this webinar about ISO 29001. First of all, thank you to everyone who's joined today. Hopefully it'll be of interest and value to you. This session is being recorded, and so that will be available for reviewing afterwards and posterity, and you can have a little review in your own time should you so desire. Okay. So just a few little things, a little bit of information about NQA for those of you that don't know us. I won't spend vast amounts of time on this because obviously that's not what you're here for, but there's a little bit on the screen there about who we are, where we operate, and the services that we provide. I'll just kind of flick through those as we're going along. Okay, hopefully the screen is changing before your eyes. Okay. Okay, good. So just some kind of key information then about the next kind of 45 minutes, hour or so that you're going to be with me. It says 45 minutes. Obviously, sometimes it goes on a little bit past that. There's a Q&A session at the end, and obviously that gives us as long as we need to for me to answer any questions that may come through. You should see on your screens, as it seems to be working because I can see people are typing in, there's a little question panel. Feel free as you're going along to put questions in there. I won't answer them until the end, but I will answer them kind of to the group, if that makes sense. So so rather than kind of interrupt the flow of what we're talking about. Okay. And like I say, there's a recording of this that will be circulated afterwards that you can watch again, or show your friends and relatives and other people that may be interested. Okay. So what we're going to be talking about this afternoon, the next hour or so, is 29001. Okay, and in particular, what 29001 is. Why we need another standard, another ISO standard, or why it's felt we need one, an overview of the standard requirements, a little bit of a breakdown of some of the clauses and the additional requirements, okay, some potential benefits or the way that the industry is thinking, next steps that you may wish to take, and then, like I say, a Q&A session towards the end there, okay. So hopefully that's what you're expecting. It's obviously not interactive, this process, unfortunately, so you will be listening to me talk, but the idea is that you'll get some information. I'll explain the points we're going along, and I'll be illustrating those on the screen as well, okay? So a little bit of an introduction then, okay, so 29001 then, okay, it's basically, as it says there, a new British standard that came about tail end of last year, okay, and it's essentially 9001, but for the built environment, okay, so the construction sector, if you would like to call it that, okay, they've called it the built environment, but essentially it's construction, okay, and every part and facet of construction that could be considered, okay. And just a little bit of reason, if you like, the generic nature of 9001. has led to some differences in interpretation of its requirement and indeed application and auditing and so on. And it's kind of led to elements of kind of formality and lip service and so on. And it's not really kind of got into the nitty gritty of particular sectors and industries. And you know, a decision has been made to kind of introduce a standard that can be applied specifically to a construction or the built environment. Okay. So that's what we're going to be talking about largely, essentially kind of those changes that they've made to the standard or those additional requirements. Okay, so why the need for a new standard or another standard then? Okay, so taking into consideration those points that we just said, okay, 9001 has been around for an awful long time. Okay, as we all know, it's applicable to any and every sector and business and organisation throughout the world, or can be applied. But it's felt that, you know, there's an element of shortfall when it comes to the built environment. Okay. And one of the strengths and arguably the weaknesses at the same time is that generic nature that it can apply to anything from the built environment through to manufacturing and retail, food manufacture, pharmaceuticals, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the idea was, the thinking was to introduce some specific and kind of focused elements when it comes to construction, the built environment. Okay, so, and also as well, the last point there, some of the concern arises from the fact that 9001 can to some degree be considered as being sort of organizational systems, whereas those of you in the construction sector or have been exposed to it will be aware that it's more of a project-based process when it comes to construction itself. Okay, so the standard, when you start to go through it, you'll see some of the terminology and the wording. You can see how it's built to focus on those project-based structures of a management system within those kind of businesses. Okay, and the idea then, the thinking on, just to take that forward, okay, is that projects, by definition, that they require that more kind of definite and specific kind of quality assurance at each stage, from that initial kind of inquiry or invitation to tender through to pre-qualification and so on and so forth, through to obviously building, commissioning, test and acceptance handover, and end of life as well. Okay, that kind of, once the building's gone through its useful life cycle, what happens after that as well, you'll start to see those principles come through as well. Okay, so the idea is then that this 99001 2022 quality management systems for the built environment is basically what they're asking to do. And it's, when you look at the standard, it's essentially 9001, but with kind of bolt on some specific areas that it's asking us, okay, consider 9001, but also do this. Okay, so that's what it's about. It's slightly different look. It looks the same as 9001, but it's got kind of a few extra sections in certain parts. Okay. It's a supplementary set of requirements, basically, is what it's meant to complement 9001 rather than be instead of. Okay. So the key thing here, that it's been written by and for the sector. Okay, I've sat in a few kind of committee meetings and bits and pieces when this has been discussed, and the people that have been involved in developing this, they're not just kind of, you know, people sitting in rooms coming up with the wonderful ways or more awkward ways of doing things for us all. This has kind of been written by industry to try and help and provide that assurance and quality control and assurance throughout the built environment. Okay, seeking to consolidate experience and expectations. Okay. And like I said, construction is vast. You know, it's obviously it's as wide as it is tall and everything in between. But this standard has been designed or written to cover and consider the whole built environment sector. Okay, like it says there, give some examples: structural engineering, architecture, professional trades, anyone in the supply chain, surveyors, QSs, and so on and so forth. Okay, also factors in the tail end or the back end, if you like, around decommissioning, potential of demolition, and so on and so forth, and afterwards. Okay. Okay. So 9001, the principles behind it haven't changed, and they're not intended to. Okay, it's just building on and enhancing some of those specific requirements around the built environment. Okay. And obviously, we are where we are in the world at this moment in time around this, the post-Grenfell world, as it's known, unfortunately. But obviously, the processes, you'll see elements come through, certain terminology around safety, use and in use, and so on and so forth. Okay, so and it calls out to specific legislation within the built environment. Okay. All sizes and shapes of projects and things that may go on, okay, within the built environment, okay, but it's intended not to become just another administrative overhead. I think it's one of the worst things in all the world when an ISO standard becomes that. So as any management system, try and avoid that. but try and look at actually what it's trying to achieve and how it can help organizations to achieve that. And even if you're not going to pursue potentially kind of certification or anything like that towards this standard, it can certainly be used and obtained as a way of kind of areas to consider within the business if you're working at the built environment sector. Okay. So fundamentally, it's looking at clarifying and enhancing some of those more generic requirements that 9001 that prescribes. Okay. So, like I say, anything. The idea of 99001 is that it aimed at all and any organisations operating in the built environment sector. Okay, within the UK. Okay. Not just a quality manager, okay, if that's the case and you've got one, it's not just meant to be focused on a the person responsible for quality or persons. It's meant to become like a project-based tool, and hopefully that will be part and parcel of what may become in the management system moving forward. Okay, so like I say, given that structure to a project from beginning, from inception right through to handover, commissioning, and indeed ongoing use and life cycle as well. Okay. One of the things you'll see, or a number of the things you'll see kind of coming up as we talk through the next period of this afternoon, it factors in social, economic, and sustainability factors as well. That comes up time and time again, okay? So it's really starting to kind of bring together some of these more kind of environmental, health and safety, and socio-economic kind of factors that arguably should be considered as part and parcel of a normal 9001 system, but it's now talking about them specifically as opposed to just kind of alluding to them. It's putting these words actually in the standard. Okay. So the idea is it will ultimately, God willing, lead to this kind of practical framework by which kind of those in the built environment in the construction sector can apply to projects and hopefully see, not just looking at things as an overall business management or management system, but in theory kind of applying 99001 to individual projects as it goes along. So more of a project-based standard rather than a generic kind of organizational standard. Okay. So yeah, it's hot off the press, so to speak. There's bits of chatter in the industry. I do an awful lot of auditing within the sector, and it is starting to kind of filter through now. So yeah, good point to capture it and be aware of it. Okay. So what I was going to do for the next little session is around essentially kind of running through the standard. Hopefully those of you that are running a 9001 management system or any management system that follows the NXSL structure, you'll recognize some of these headline terms that we're using. And what I've done essentially is put those headline areas in and then kind of extracted out, kind of the additional requirements and the kind of terminology that 99001 is talking about. Okay. So kind of going straight off the bat then, okay, those, again, you'll recognize these hopefully from your ISO 9001. So context and interested parties, okay. So straight off the bat then, okay, when it's talking about context and interested parties, 99001 is asking organizations to consider, okay, like I said just a short while ago, your commitments and considerations towards social, economic, and environmental sustainability, including progress towards net zero emissions. Okay, so whether we like it or not, these things are happening, and the construction sector is obviously exposed to those. Okay, it talks about interested parties. It's asking you to consider things specifically around members of the public, project funders and investors, and so on and so forth, the owners and operators of the asset, okay, project teams and so on. So whereas 9001 just talks about interested parties in general, this is kind of starting to name not individuals, but certain groups of people that you need to take into consideration, okay. So like it says, you've got to ensure that your management system takes into account sustainability and social value impacts. And all of this needs to be maintained as documented information. That's one of the things that I picked up on for those that are running a 9001 system. Not many places require you to have documented information. Context and interested parties is one of them, but 99001 is asking you to document this information, write these things down, okay, in some way or form. That comes in up a few places, okay. You'll see that that's one of the key differences I've noticed, okay. So when it comes to scope then, obviously it's asking you to consider not just what you do as a business, but obviously make sure that anything that kind of operates underneath and within that is considered as part and parcel of the 99001 system as well, okay? And when it comes to setting up your system, there's no additional requirements, but there is a note that kind of basically alludes to this idea of the quality of information being key to a management system, and it's looking for that consistency, level of detail around information that's held within the system, okay? So like it says there, this is a note extracted specifically from the standard. Okay, the quality of information is key for the built environment sector as it's characterized by long activity life cycle. So whereas potentially some organizations can be quick turnover within the built environment, these are longer term projects, buildings in use for decades. So it's not just a moment in time, it's asking you to think about the longer term impacts of what you're actually doing. Okay, so the idea is that the data and information being held and generated by the management system and you as an organization is of a good quality, so to ensure have confidence that things are as they need to be. Okay, so kind of following through then on from context, you're going to the next part of the standard. It's around leadership. Okay, so bearing in mind these aren't kind of just the only requirements. You've got to factor in 9001 in the background of these. These are the additional requirements. Okay, so from a leadership perspective, include quality management in top management responsibilities. Okay, so making top management team accountable and responsible when it comes to the system. Okay, taking accountability for the management and delivery of quality on projects. So seems like a given, but obviously, it's now calling out to these specific things within leadership. Okay, ensuring that quality management is promoted as integral at all levels and communicated to the supply chain. Okay, so you'll see that come up a few times as well as we go through the rest of the slides here. The supply chain is becoming much more prominent in terms of what the management system is asking for. It's not just kind of considered, oh, you might have a supply chain potentially and it may impact what you do. With 99,001, it's saying no, these people are a big part of what you do, because that's the reality within the construction sector. Okay, and ensure the people in quality management roles are competent and they're supported to perform their roles impartially and independently. So a few little bolt-ons there to what we know and love under leadership. Okay, but you can see kind of the flavor that it's starting to take. Okay, customer focus then. Okay, so 9001 is built around customer focus and pleasing the customer, keeping them happy, but building on those leadership elements. Okay, it's asking you to demonstrate leadership and commitment by ensuring that products and service performance is measured, quality is prioritized when considering on time and on budget delivery, and any actions are taken if planned results are not or will not be achieved through the project lifecycle. Okay, so again, it's building on this idea around customer focus. A management system should be customer oriented. Okay, but it basically it's also us saying, bolting on a few things here, saying, look, okay, on time and budget delivery is important, but it needs to factor in, make sure don't lose sight of that customer focus element of what's going on. Okay. When it comes to your policy, quality policy, okay, no additional requirements, okay, but it does ask that the organisation communicate your policy to all relevant interested parties in project supply chains, okay, so whereas in 9001 it's just be communicated, understood, and so on and so forth, it's now specifically calling out to relevant interested parties within the project supply chain. So, contractors, whoever it may be, it's these other people that should and could be exposed to your policy, okay. So roles and responsibilities then, okay, so again, building on the fundamentals of 9001, but it's asking that top management ensure that a competent person is appointed as the management system representative with oversight of quality for projects. So those that you've been running 9001 for anything pre-2015, okay, you remember that there was previously a requirement for a quality management system representative. That was done away with, but 99,001 has kind of reintroduced that, okay, so, and specifically, there's a representative with oversight of quality for projects, okay, so it says person, I would assume, like make an assumption that it could potentially be more than one person, but obviously we'll have to see how that pans out, but it is using person in the singular term there, so see what happens there, okay. And it all goes on to say that that management representative shall have responsibility and authority for the oversight of requirements around communicating and establishing the policy on a project basis. So you can start to see this individual, it's not just open to everyone to kind of pick up bits and pieces as they go along. There's going to be a focused responsibility to ensure that these things are carried out and assured through project delivery, okay. Representatives shall be supported, okay, to ensure that quality management data is sufficient, supported by top management and indeed the rest of the organisation. And top management shall clearly define governance and support arrangements. So again, although there's an individual here that's being tasked with certain things, it goes back to top management being supporting, engaging, and providing the suitable time and the resources that need to be in place to let that person do their job effectively. Okay, particularly around projects. Okay. Just continuing then with regards to roles, responsibilities, top management shall ensure that any roles, responsibilities and authorities relevant to the project are identified and defined in accordance with the nature and complexity of the project. So rather than 9001, which just talks about roles, responsibilities being defined in general, okay, this is again targeting and focusing on projects specifically. Okay. And top management shall ensure that the management representative, who we've just been speaking about, has organisational freedom and unrestricted access to the project leadership to resolve quality issues. So there you go. There's some interesting things kind of coming into play there, okay, that's saying, well, okay, this person has got the right, if you like, it says, it uses the term, freedom and unrestricted access to be able to go and ask questions, have access to the project leadership team, to be able to challenge and deal with and resolve quality issues, whatever they may be within the project. So it's kind of giving this person some reasonable powers, if you like, within an organisation. Okay. And lastly, there, okay, shall ensure that the management representative with oversight of quality has the authority to pause operations in order for quality issues to be addressed. So, yeah, it's kind of making some sort of bold statements there for this person. So hopefully there's someone that's going to be able to deal with power well, because it's they could potentially have quite a reasonable impact on the organisation and indeed the project. Okay. But you can see how that's how the system's 99,001 is varying and going over and above the 9001 elements and requirements. Okay. So going into the planning side of things then, okay, risks and opportunities, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, okay, but it's asking you to talk about risks and opportunities related to the projects, okay, so not just in general with the business, but around projects themselves, okay, the process of construction, and indeed, what's interesting here, the subsequent use of the asset, the organisation as a whole, society and the economy and the environment. So piece of work there, okay, so risks and opportunities, lots to be taken into consideration. They're not just about risks and around not achieving intended results. This is asking you to consider those specifically around projects, society, the economy, and so on and so forth. So some quite kind of particular things there you need to take into consideration. Okay. And again, maintaining documenting information, okay, on those potential impacts of those risks, okay. Make plans to address them. It's a lot more specific and focused when it comes outside of 9001. 9001 is a little bit kind of woolly when it comes to risks and opportunities. It doesn't really ask so much in the way of documenting information, whereas 9001 is asking for that specifically. Okay. Going on to objectives then, okay. Now, those of you that run 9001 will be familiar with the idea and concept of setting an objective, which is nothing strange or new to anyone. But 99,001 is asking objectives to be set for each project, okay, to reflect contractual and other requirements, including social, economic, and environmental commitments. So no longer, well, it is still acceptable, but obviously from a 99,001 perspective, it's asking that you that these are set per project or for projects, okay, rather than just generically across the organisation, okay. And those objectives take into account scope, time, cost, and life cycle, and so on and so forth. So some quite specific things there, okay. When it comes to changes within the system there, okay, again, obviously changes are allowed to happen within an organisation and within a project, and they almost certainly will, but the 99,001 is asking to assess the need for those changes, implement processes to make sure that those changes don't conflict with your arrangements within your management system, that they're communicated and understood to all relevant interested parties, and that those risks, that those changes are assessed for risk on the impact on risk and opportunities and any associated action. So the idea is that change will happen, it's allowed to happen, but it's going over and above 9001. It's asking that specific information be communicated out, information be maintained, and risks and everything be updated to consider those changes that may or may not happen. Okay, so again, it's building on the principles of 9001, but quite a few bolt-ons here. Okay. So when it comes to people then, okay, within the business or the project, the organisation, okay, if you're meeting 99,001, you're working towards it, you as an organisation need to ensure that people are competent to perform their particular roles and responsibilities formally assigned to them, okay. Sounds like a sensible thing to do. Make sure you've got competent people doing their job, but these are words that aren't really in 9001. It talks about competency in general, This is all talking about particular roles and responsibilities that they're responsible for, okay? When it comes to infrastructure, again, infrastructure is spoken about in 9001 under the resource side of things, but 99,001 is using some particular terms here around physical and digital on and off-site infrastructure to achieve project objectives, okay? So it's recognizing that these things can ultimately affect projects and they need to be taken into consideration, okay? And maintaining the environment for the operation of processes, okay? Including here ethical behavior, social responsibility at all levels and within the organization and the supply chain. So it's not asking you to just look between your four walls, so to speak. It's looking at that bigger picture. Remember earlier when I said about supply chains coming into the picture a lot more, this is where the whole thing's coming in. It's not just about looking after what you're responsible for directly, it's looking for those things that you can control, influence, and those indirect impacts that you're having, okay? So monitor and measurement resources then, okay, so anything that you may use or in terms of equipment or people to monitor and measure and ensure things are happening, you need to make sure that those resources are competent, demonstrate the required behaviours, like it says there, available, have the necessary capacity and authority, I mean, impartial from free from conflicts of interest. So the conflicts of interest. So the thinking behind this then is that anyone who's kind of, given an indication as to, performance and monitoring and measurement, that they've got these criteria considered, okay? They're competent, they're available, they've got capacity and authority and so on, okay? Very specific there when it comes to 99,001. Okay, yeah, measurement traceability then, so from a calibration perspective, ensure that equipment is calibrated and aligned, absolutely fine. And then some little bolt-on bits around maintaining documenting information, processes for recall, and consequent remeasurement and rework. Okay, so it's building on the principles of 9001. We're going a little bit further still. Okay, just kind of a little bit of devil in the detail there. Some of the things that we as auditors kind of long for when it comes to 9001, because it can be a little bit vague, whereas this is kind of giving us a lot more to hang your hat on. But on the other side of the coin, it helps organizations as well to be able to say, look, okay, we need to do this now, okay, rather than just having a generic set of requirements, okay. Now 9001 talks about knowledge within an organization, okay, so, and 99,001 builds on that, okay, and it's asking that you capture, analyze and learn from project knowledge. So again, it's using that word particularly around project, okay, anything that you gain from a project through execution, planning and use and so on, that needs to be taken from and learned from, okay? And any lessons learned to be shared throughout the organization, okay? Information be uniquely identifiable and dated, so interesting one that, okay? So sometimes I'm having conversations during audits and it's like, okay, we do this and that and the other, and there's some generic information floating about, but this is asking that, any information that comes out of the whole project process is uniquely identifiable and dated, okay, so that people can trace it and put their hand on where that's when it happened, okay. And also establish processes to ensure that you as an organization can access knowledge from professional bodies and other trusted sources, okay. So yeah, whoever they may be, of which there are many within the construction sector, okay. So competence of people then, so absolutely, you've got to ensure that people working on behalf of the organization, not just directly, but indirectly as well, so contractors and labour only subcontractors and 0 hours and so on. So it's not just your PAYE people, okay? You've got to make sure these people are competent, given appropriate authority to approve all aspects of what they're responsible for. And it says here the organisation should ensure external providers provide competent people to work on projects under its control. So again, just because you're subcontracting something out doesn't dilute your responsibility or accountability to ensure that competent people are doing what they should, are on site and doing what they should be doing, okay. Maintainers documenting information, including how the competence requirements have been determined, okay. So again, it's kind of 9001 plus an extra 10%, okay. All this is just saying, okay, it's asking, none of this I don't think is particularly unusual or kind of unrealistic, but it's stuff that doesn't really, or it's nothing, it's not specifically stated in 9001, okay. So awareness then, okay, things that you need to make your workers and people working on your behalf aware of: contribution to the product and service conformity, product safety, contribution to social, economic and environmental commitments, so there it is again, okay, and the importance of ethical behaviour. So yeah, I don't think the word ethical has ever been used in 9001 before. It may have been sort of implied in the background, but it's starting to punch through here. Okay. So communication then within your business and the organization and around the project. Okay, so establish the processes to enable effective communication to all project functions. Ensure effective and accessible induction of people, share the knowledge and communicate changes. So yeah, pretty straightforward stuff. Nothing there hopefully that you would disagree with, but it's putting some specific things there. Those of you familiar with 9001 will know the communication clause. It's quite vague. It just says, you know, determine what you're going to communicate, when, how, and so on and so forth. It's not really going into anything kind of granular. Okay, whereas this is. Okay. So documented information then. Okay, so having that process in place to ensure that you're aware of current statutory and regulatory requirements. Okay, creating and updating that information, keep it on a suitable medium, soft copy, hard copy, whatever it may be. Okay, suitable approval methods, changes communicated to relevant interested parties, and stating the reasons for retention and duration and disposition. So it's kind of taken a step back here. Okay, the previous versions of 9001 were quite a bit more specific when it came to things like this. I think what they've kind of realized is that it did get a little bit diluted, a little bit kind of vague, where it's now starting to pull back in some of these specific requirements that, around kind of things such as documenting information to make it a bit more definite what's going on here. Okay, that's what it's after. Okay. And there's a little extract here just out of the standard itself. So it's a little bit small, but you'll be able to read it when you get the slides through. Okay, so operational planning and control. So as an organization, you've got to determine the sequence of activities and how these interact to assure and maintain integrity of products, services, and assets, considering risks and opportunities. And I won't read through all of these, but basically it's asking you as an organization to take into account, okay, so when you're planning to execute the project and the resources and everything within it, it's asking you to take into account certain things, okay? And that includes potential impacts on the physical, economic, and social environment, the complexity of design, physical access throughout the project lifecycle, suitability of components and material used in the project, suitability of products in the finished asset, potential obsolescence, okay, within the built environment, okay? Any aspects related to handover, decommissioning, deconstruction, and so on and so forth. So you can start to see within 9001, it wouldn't go into this level of detail, okay? It would just talk about things in general, about, okay, determining exact plan in general. But with 9001, it's going to some real kind of industry specific terms and terminology that you're going to want to take into consideration. Okay, so like I said, whether or not you choose to go for certification, it's not quite at that stage yet, the standard, but certainly you can work in accordance with these things because it's going to be introduced some best practice within you and your organization. Okay. So around the requirements of products and services then, okay, like I said there, consider factors such as political capability and capacity, okay, digital capability, supply chain capacity, design requirements, innovation, so on and so forth. So again, things that just don't exist in 9001, but that are peculiar to and relevant to the built environment. Okay, so when you're establishing requirements for products and services, this is some of the criteria that's asking you to consider. Okay. And when you come to review those requirements, okay, it's asking you to consider customer requirements, of course, contractual requirements, absolutely, but then it goes on to talk about project lifecycle of the asset itself, buildability, okay, intended use and limitations, and so on and so forth, okay, and also as well planned or foreseeable changes to statutory and regulatory requirements. So these things they're asking to be on the horizon now, okay, be aware of these things that could or may change shape, okay. So if there's changes to requirements, so if a customer changes their requirements, goodness me, surely a customer never changes their mind, when it comes to the built environment, but okay, but as and when it does, or if it happens, okay, there needs to be that defined change management process in place, okay, and allow change traceability and authorization, so who's given the blessing, change competence, and any changes to risks and opportunities. So again, going into some specifics there, it recognizes that changes take place within the project, but it's saying, well, okay, these will happen, but ensure that these controls are in place to show that it's traceable, who authorized it, how can that affect the rest of the business, the project, and other projects as well, okay. So design development then, okay, for those of you who design and build or contractors design portion or whatever it may be, obviously design is always a little bit of a, people shy away from it a little bit, but nonetheless it is in there and it will affect some, if not most of you when it comes to the built environment, okay. It builds on the 9001 requirements, okay, to include processes at organisation and project level, taking into account specific requirements for each project, okay, and those include life cycle, compatibility, product safety, and so on and so forth. So again, obviously design within the built environment is very, very big. And obviously there's huge factors around, you know, CDM and so on and so forth as examples, but obviously this is factoring in some particular requirements for you to consider, okay. So moving on then through to externally provided processes, products and services, which I've not come across a construction company yet that doesn't use some form of contractor or outsource something, okay? And when that happens, okay, it's asking you as an organization to ensure that appropriate criteria, okay, for identification, approval and reapproval are established by yourselves, okay? 9001 talks about externally provided this as well, of course it does, but it's kind of going a little bit further still, like I've already said, okay? So building into your system those processes for responsibility and authority for approval, maintaining relevant documented information, whatever that may be, what approvals are based upon, okay? Review of performance, it says in there, evaluating client preferred providers, because that comes up no end of times. I hear during, you know, it's a nominated supplier or it's preferred, whatever it may be, we had to use them. Well, okay, that's absolutely fine, but just ensure they're still adhering to your project control processes, okay? That it's not just, well, you know, we've been asked to use them, that's it. Well, okay, let's exercise some sort of degree of control over them, okay? So like it says there, shall require and validate that external providers apply appropriate controls to external providers in their own supply chain. So that's an interesting one. So subcontractors of subcontractors, which I'm sure some or many of you may have come, I certainly have in my career over the years. Okay, so this is where it's subcontracted 3 or 4 times down. Okay, and that control potentially gets diluted. So 99001 recognise that happens and ask that suitable control is applied to them. Okay. So maintaining documented information, okay, on the approval criteria and the supporting information, okay. Define responsibilities, ensure appropriate controls for each life cycle of the project, life cycle stage of the project, okay. And obviously any delegated verification activity. So if you're not actually, you know, if you like, testing, accepting and blessing that part of the project or the project stage, well, okay, who is and is that person responsible of aware of what's going on, and can we put our hands and say yes, we're comfortable, that's as it needs to be, okay. So some of the information then that goes to external providers, it's asking you to consider now, okay, relevant technical data, design development controls, you can see there, test, inspection, verification, and there it is again, ethical behavior and sustainability commitments, as well as health, safety and well-being of workers. So yeah, not just suitable, or not just, they're considering that it's not just acceptable to say, yes, you can do the job, that's okay. They're asking you to say, well, okay, can you do it in an ethical manner, sustainable manner, and so on and so forth, okay? So it's no longer just can you do the job for the right price, it's okay, based upon other criteria as well, okay? So yeah, control of production and service provision then, okay, so when you're actually doing the job, establish criteria around workmanship, changes, accountabilities, security, like it says there, equipment, assets and information, and so on and so forth. It's asking 9001 kind of alludes to this, but obviously this is going a little step further to say that, okay, the specific kind of controls need to be in place around certain parts of what you're doing, okay. And identification and traceability then, okay, determine and address the risks arising when traceability is lost or obscured. So if a component part of the building, if it's something that's being kind of built into the fabric of the building, it's going to be lost either physically or kind of potentially hidden or obscured, okay, how do we manage and ensure that any necessary identification traceability is ensured and maintained, okay. So property belonging to customers or external providers, okay. So that could be intellectual property or physical property, whatever that may be. If there's like, you know, materials issued, or whether it's, you know, information that's included in a design phase or whatever it may be, okay. So you've got to ensure that there's methods in place to preserve those products and any constituent parts, physical storage areas, access egress routes, and so on, identification, traceability marks. So basically making sure that anything that comes your way that doesn't belong to you, that is either belongs to the customer or an external provider that's coming into the realms of your control or your project, that there's suitable controls applied across the board. Okay. So going into the tail end of it now, so I realise we're probably going to be about another 10 minutes or so. So it's gone a little bit past the time, but we're about 10 minutes to go now. So post-delivery activities then. So you deliver the projects, all is well in the world, okay? But after that, it asks you to consider collection analysis of operational data that meets predetermined requirements, okay? So the performance of the asset, any lessons learned, and so on, okay? So it's not just this is after the event, obviously, okay? Once the project's you're in a potentially a liability period, or kind of whatever it may be, okay? So shall take appropriate action when issues are detected post-delivery, of course, okay? Documenting information to ensure that customers up to date and accurate information on handover, and also shall ensure continuing access to relevant information post-delivery, okay? So yeah, this is the thing, it's that long going after the asset's been handed over. It doesn't necessarily end there, okay? It's ensuring that that information is readily available as and when it needs to be, or when it realistically can be, okay? Okay, so maintaining relevant documented information related to changes made through the life cycle of the project. For example, changes to specification or requirements, design and handover, facilities management, and so on. So basically, after the event, there's some kind of some legacy kind of quality control here, if you like, or quality assurance, okay? And also defining that criteria for handover, including any phased handovers. If there's if projects are being handed over in phases, how those interactions work, how to ensure that everything's as it needs to be, okay? So non-conformities then, okay, so we're all familiar with the terms around non-conformity within 9001, okay, but that process has also got to include defining specific roles and responsibilities, controlling and considering the effects on other processes and products and services, okay. And if and when the root cause is identified as a design issue, okay, then that issue shall be reported to the relevant design team, okay. So you won't find that in 9001, but okay, but it's there it is here, okay, because it's recognised that that's because obviously ultimately that can affect designs within other built assets and so on and so forth, okay. So it's not just the knowledge you shared amongst industry, if you like, okay. And any non-conformities requiring a concession or design change shall be notified to the design authority. So some little kind of tweaks there, okay. So when it comes to performance evaluation then, so how well are things going in terms of the projects, okay? So it asks that all aspects of the organisation, including projects, are taken into account, okay? And shall consider plans for testing and inspection, competence, budgets, project performance, and so on and so forth. So 9001, not specific, okay? Just ask that you determine what you're going to measure, what you're going to do with the information, and so on. 99001 is calling out to some specific words, if you like, and things, okay, some specific criteria that's asking you to take into consideration. And there's some examples on the screen there. These are obviously all detailed in the standard itself, okay. And obviously, once you've got that performance data, it asks that you analyze and evaluate that information, okay, and based upon that, develop and implement plans for improvement, okay, and ensure that project life cycle is taken into account. So again, nothing strange or startling. 9001 asks that you analyze and evaluate, but it's asking you to look at it at a more project level and ensure that it's fed back into lessons learned into other projects and so on and so forth, okay. Last couple of bits then, when it comes to 9001 and 99001 and how it relates. Internal audits then, you still need to do them. There's no escaping those, unfortunately. But it does ask that a few little bolt-ons and extra clarifications, okay? So ensuring that ongoing projects are included in the program. So not just looking at your management system, it's asking that you build projects into your internal audit program. So it's not just touching on them, skirting around them. It's embedding them within your internal audit program, okay. On the same basis, ensuring that a risk-based audit program for projects to be developed. So yeah, you might just have kind of a little teeny tiny job that's only running for a couple of days. Well, okay, you might have a longer term project that's running for 2 years, and obviously you've got to build in your risk into your program. You don't want to go looking at that 2-year project just once at the beginning. You want to sample it as you go through it, as it goes through its various stages, okay. Keep that program as documented information. which interestingly isn't a requirement under 9001. You don't have to maintain your program as documented information, whereas in 99,001 you do. Okay, and believe it or not, it asks to ensure that auditors are competent. It doesn't actually say that in 9001. It talks about competence in a general sense, people performing their jobs, but it doesn't include under internal audits, whereas this is specifically saying that auditors are competent. Going back to previous versions of 9001 that kind of had those requirements in. So kind of taking a bit of a step back in time. Okay. When it comes to management review then, okay, got to ensure that reviews are incorporated into reporting and evaluation requirements, incorporate the review of key interfaces with interested parties, and are consistent, again, here's those words, social, economic, and environmental commitments. So nothing particularly unusual then when it comes to management review, but obviously is asking you to factor in those interested parties, interfaces, and those socio-economic and environmental commitments. Okay, so as well as obviously all the 9001 isms that we know and love. Okay, like it says there, considering those trends in time, cost and quality, capacity, social, economic and environmental, and so on. Okay, that's within your management review process. And the outputs, so it's not necessarily talking here about the management review minutes, but it talks about outputs, as actions and decisions related to the things you've spoken about. Okay, and it's asked that those be communicated to relevant interested parties, taking into account contractual and other requirements. So yeah, the idea is that if there's a management review held, there's decisions being made that can ultimately affect projects, end users, contractors, and so on, that those decisions and information are disseminated out as relevant. Okay. So yeah, and when it comes to improvement, then you still need to improve. You still need to better demonstrate continual improvement. Okay, but it's asking that you determine and select opportunities for improvement during the life cycle. Okay, ensure those opportunities are project level, consistent throughout the organisation, so they're not just isolated and held in their one project manager's inbox, so to speak. They go out to the wider audience. Okay, shall consider sustainability and identify RFIs to engaging with interested parties. Okay, so yeah, opens it up a little bit more there. Okay, last couple of bits now. Okay, so then we're into non-conformity and corrective action. Okay, it's asking you as an organisation to determine the differences between a management system versus a product and service non-conformity. So it recognises that there is a distinction. Okay, work on people with the actions, interested parties, communicate to relevant interested parties, and keep documenting information on the effectiveness of the corrective action, not just that you took corrective action, but the effect, was it effective? Do we need to take anything more? Okay. Improvement then, just the last little bit then, okay, improvement shall be implemented during the life cycle of projects and communicated to relevant interested parties. Okay, so it still needs to happen. Out of breath now. So literally the last couple of slides and just potential benefits then. So things to consider, because obviously having said all of that, you think to yourself, goodness me, an awful lot of work. You know, what is the benefit here? What is the thinking behind all this thing? Okay, so just a single slide then. Okay, so just kind of recapping on the things we've spoken about. 9001 can arguably considered generic. It works very, very well. Obviously, it's well established and well embedded in various industries. But you know, sometimes those generic, the fact that it can be applied to everyone can lead to a little bit of dilution. Okay, so you can kind of see, hopefully, the things we've spoken about is starting to refocus on the built environment particularly. Okay, so like it says there, clarifies and specifies some of the key requirements of 9001, but around the built environment. Okay. So the idea is it's giving those a bit of weight to kind of key personnel to focus on delivery of quality service and so on. So we work on about the people having particular responsibilities and so on and so forth for decision making and so on. So the idea is it gives a bit more kind of ownership, gives a bit more structure to the whole project-based side of things, rather than just a generic management system that applies to through and across the entire organisation. Okay, and like it says, their quality in the context of 99,001 is taken to mean more than ever before, covering compliance, risks, and protected businesses and lives. Okay, so it's not just about kind of quality of the product and service, it's looking at that bigger picture, social, economic, statutory, regulatory, and compliance obligations that are embedded within all of that. Okay. So quite literally the last slide. Okay, things to take into consideration there. So like I say, this isn't something you know, it's in the early stages of being, if you like. Okay, from my sort of opinion, it's intended, I'm taking it as a complementary standard to 9001. So I'm going to start factoring these things in when I'm auditing, and not auditing against the standard, but looking at them from a, sort of when I'm asking questions and challenging and looking at what's going on. Okay, so yeah, should you wish to decide to go down this road, look at what you've currently got. Okay, obtain a copy of the standard. We can't distribute it, unfortunately, because it's copyrighted, but you are able to access it. It's a buyable standard. Okay, look at what you've got. Look at where those particular gaps, if you like, may be. Okay, start to factor in those elements anyway of sustainability and social and economic considerations. Okay, just consider it as part of your ongoing measure review and improvement process. Okay, I think basically that the kind of the upshot here is just kind of just look, okay, start to factor in some of the ideas and principles that it's talking about into your general management system. Okay, and ultimately then that may kind of help and enhance what you're already doing. Okay. So yeah, I mean, obviously I'll leave those up on the screen there just for you to peruse. Like I say, you will get copies of this as once we're finished today. So I realize we're running a little bit over time. Apologise for that, and I realise there's quite a bit to take in there. Bit of a blast of information, unfortunately. But yeah, hopefully you can kind of see where it's kind of going, what it's kind of aiming for. Essentially, it's 9,001 plus like 10-15%. Okay, but that 10-15% potentially makes all the difference when it comes to the built environment. So hopefully that's been of value, dare I say interest, to everyone here on the call today. Thank you for coming along. What I would do, I'll switch over now. I won't put all the questions on the screen, but what I'll do, I'll have a look, see what's come in, and if there's any kind of trends, i.e., that is to say, particular, questions around a particular area, I might take those away and answer in bulk, via a blog or something like that. But we'll have a look and see what we've got. Let's see what we've got. Questions in. Undot the panel. Okay, so there's a few here. So someone's saying, are there companies certified against 99,001 outside Great Britain? At this moment in time, no. It's at this moment in time, it's very early stages. Certification bodies such as NQA, we're not in a position to be able to offer accredited certification. It's very much it only came out the tail end of last year, so it's a standard that's kind of primarily functioning, hitting within the UK at this moment in time. Could you be more specific regarding integration of supply chain in 99,001 QMS? Well, I mean, the supply chain in any organisation obviously is critical to your QMS, but within 99,001, we saw a couple of examples of the things that it's asking you to consider. One of the things that springs to mind is those when a subcontractor subcontracts further still. Okay, so those kinds of things, it's asking you to factor in that criteria, just as an example. Obviously, I can't go into many layers of what that would look like, but obviously it's in particular it's around the competencies, that criteria, and the interaction that contractors have around across different projects. Okay, it's not just get them through the door and carry on using them because we've been using them forever. Well, okay, no, how do we actually manage these as contractors? Okay, let me see here. Consequent remeasurements, will that result in identifying the need to remeasure previous activities complete where equipment is found to be out of calibration or maybe damaged? Yes, basically, Thomas, that's the thinking there, that if a piece of monitor measurement equipment is found to be out of calibration or damaged or given incorrect or inaccurate results, then the idea is that some form of traceability or records or whatever it may be will be able to ensure that whatever else that piece of equipment has touched and has given the blessing to, you need to be able to make sure, well, okay, we might need to, but like, when car manufacturers do recalls and so on, okay, well, hang on, we know that batch is affected. Let's pull it back and make sure that we're comfortable. Okay. With requirements in 99,001 relating to documenting information, will other standards be updated accordingly? Thinking ISO 10,005. Yeah, okay. I mean, yeah, one of the within the ISOs as they stand, the requirement for documenting information was very much diluted down back in 2015 when they started the revising the look and feel of the key standards. In my opinion, in some ways, it kind of went a little bit too far. That's just obviously that's not for taken as read, but it's sometimes it can be a little bit tough for organisations to say, well, what do I actually sort of need to do? I know it talks about documenting information to the extent necessary, but that's not always particularly helpful sometimes. Whereas when I've been looking through 99,001, you can start to see where it's now kind of reintroducing those requirements for documented information in certain key places. What that ultimately looks like during the interim reviews of the existing ISO standards, I don't know. Those interim reviews are based upon industry feedback, both from clients and certification bodies and so on. And obviously, what that will ultimately look like, I don't know. I feel it might kind of go back a little bit towards more. I think the idea was right, that it was trying to get away from reams and reams and reams of paperwork just for the sake of it, and no one really did anything with. But in some ways, it has gone a little bit, I don't want to say too far, but it's made it hard for organisations to really get their head around, what can I show you as an auditor to show that I'm doing things right. So that's always an open discussion point. Okay. Good. Well, those are the questions that I have on the screen. Hopefully, though, thank you for those people that asked those, and hopefully I answered them. That's pretty much all I had to talk to you about today. Hopefully it was of interest. Obviously, yeah, there's a whole host of information out there on the NQA website, just in general as well. But obviously, if there is anything specifically, you can come back to our team in NQA there, and we'll obviously be happy to help out any way we can. We can't offer consultancy or solution, but we're happy to sort of clarify and guide you through potentially the next steps that you may wish to take with this. So. Yep, thanks very much for joining, everyone. Enjoy your long weekends, for those of you who may be having them, and hopefully see you in another NQA webinar sometime soon. Thanks a lot. Take care.